My name is Yusuf Al-Hadi. I am 34 years old, and on March 14th, 2020, I watched my entire life collapse in front of my eyes. It happened so quickly that even now, years later, I sometimes wonder if my mind created parts of it to soften the blow. Thinking about what Maryam might cook for dinner. The next moment, my phone vibrated with a call from our neighbor Sass. One moment I was tightening a bolt under the hood of an old Hilux, my hands black with grease. Oh. Her voice shaking, telling me that something terrible had happened at the marketplace. I remember running. My feet pounded the pavement. My heart thrashed inside my chest like a trapped bird. When I turned the corner toward the market, I saw the black SUV's first polished metal reflecting the afternoon sun, doors still open, engine still humming. Then I saw the royal guards. Then I saw Maryam. Two men held her by the arms. She wasn't screaming, but her whole body trembled like a leaf caught between storms. She looked so small between those tall men, so fragile, so terrified. I shouted her name, but my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. One of the guards turned toward me with a look that froze my bones before I even reached them. Prince Samir ibn Rashad has requested her presence, he said, as if reading a grocery list. Requested, such a polite word, such a monstrous lie. Have you ever felt your soul trying to leave your body while you're still alive? That was what it felt like watching the guards push Maryam into the SUV. She twisted her neck one last time to look at me, eyes wide, wet, pleading before the door slammed shut. The sound echoed inside my skull like a gunshot. I chased the car until my legs gave out. Asphalt tore the skin off my palms when I fell. The taillights grew smaller, smaller, then disappeared entirely into the river of traffic, as if the city itself swallowed her whole. I thought that was the day I died. But now I know it was the day Jesus began writing a new story for me. I was not always a man who understood pain. For most of my life, I believed suffering was something that happened to other people, those who wandered from the straight path, those who angered God, those who lived without discipline or devotion. That belief wasn't taught to me out of cruelty. It was simply the air I breathed growing up. In my childhood home, faith was not a part of life, it was life. Every breath, every decision, every movement of body or thought belonged to Allah as my father understood Him. My earliest memories are of cold water splashing across my face before dawn, my father's stern voice whispering verses as he guided my small hands through the motions of wudu. The house always felt half asleep at that hour, dim light seeping under the doors, the smell of dust and old prayer rugs, the distant call of the muezzin echoing across the rooftops like a lullaby turned upside down. I remember shivering as my father wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and whispered, "A good man begins with obedience, Yusuf." I wanted to be a good man so badly. By the time I turned 10, I could recite entire surahs from memory. By 12, I had memorized nearly half the Quran. The neighborhood imam would pat my head and say, "This boy will bring honor to his family." My mother's eyes would shine with quiet pride whenever she heard me recite. Faith shaped me the way a potter shapes clay, pressing, smoothing, carving. I didn't question anything, because I never needed to. Certainty is a comfortable prison when you don't know you're inside it. But the truth is, even then, something was missing. I could never name it, but it hovered beneath all my achievements. A faint hollowness. A sense that devotion could be performed perfectly while the heart remained untouched. But I buried those feelings quickly. They felt dangerous, like cracks in a wall that was supposed to be unbreakable. Years passed. I left home, found work in a garage on the outskirts of Riyadh, and built a modest life. The heat was unbearable, most days sweat mixing with engine oil, dust coating every part of my skin, but there was something satisfying in the work, something honest. Cars didn't lie. Engines didn't scold you for asking questions. Machines broke for understandable reasons, and they could be fixed with your own hands. And then came Maryam. The day I met her, She spoke softly, barely above a whisper, as we sat in her father's sitting room. Her eyes stayed lowered, but there was something warm in her presence, something gentle that made the room feel less stiff. She didn't try to impress me, didn't hide her nervousness. Somehow that made her even more beautiful. We were married within months. Not a lavish ceremony, just family, neighbors, simple food, simple smiles. But I remember walking into our tiny two-room apartment afterward and feeling like I had stepped into a palace. Mariam placed a small vase of jasmine on the windowsill. She unpacked our dishes. She laughed, oh, how she laughed, and everything in that cramped space seemed to glow. We had so little, yet it felt like abundance. We planned meals around whatever discount vegetables we could find at the market. We argued about how to save for Hajj. Should we hide the money in a box or open a small savings account? Some nights we fell asleep talking about the children we hoped for. Mariam wanted 3, I wanted 4. We played about it constantly. Every morning, before sunrise, we knelt side by side on our prayer rugs. I remember the warmth of her shoulder brushing mine, her voice rising with mine, 2 streams of devotion merging into one. I used to think, as long as we pray, nothing can destroy us. Have you ever believed something so strongly that you built your entire life on it, only to discover later it was sand beneath your feet? That certainty carried me through everything. Through long days at the garage when customers yelled at me, through months when work was slow and money tighter than ever, through nights when the desert wind rattled the windows and I held Maryam close just to feel steady. To me, she was not only my wife, she was the living proof that God was pleased with me. She brought peace into every corner of our home. She soothed my frustrations when the world felt unfair. When I worried we didn't have enough, she would take my hands and whisper, "We have more than many, and Allah sees our hearts." Her faith strengthened mine. Her presence steadied me. I used to get home from work covered in oil and dust, and she would greet me with that radiant smile, the kind that makes you believe, even for a moment, that everything in life will be okay. She would place her hand gently on my cheek and say, "You work so hard, Yusuf. Sit, rest, let me feed you." That was love to me, not fireworks, not poetry, just 2 imperfect people choosing each other again and again in the quiet moments. We were poor, yes, but we were rich in ways I didn't understand until much later. At night, lying next to her, I used to imagine our future with such confidence. A bigger apartment, children running across the floor, a small garden she would tend, laughter filling every corner. I truly believe nothing bad could touch us if we kept praying, kept fasting, kept obeying every law we were taught. I didn't know then how fragile life could be, how quickly everything you rely on can be ripped away. I didn't know that all my certainty, all my devotion, all my careful obedience could crumble in a single afternoon. I didn't know that my faith, which I believed was unshakable, had never actually been tested. But I would soon learn. The day Maryam was taken, everything I thought I knew about God, about protection, about justice, everything was shattered. And in the wreckage of that shattered world, something new began to stir, something I didn't yet recognize. A hunger for truth that rituals had never given me, a longing for a God who actually heard me, a crack in the prison I had never realized I lived in. I didn't know it yet, but Jesus was already moving toward me, one step at a time, like dawn creeping over a dark horizon. The day after Maryam disappeared felt like stepping into a nightmare where nothing obeyed the rules of reality. My body moved, but my mind lagged behind like a shadow trying to keep up. I wandered through our apartment touching her things, the folded scarves, the little box where she kept our Hajj savings, the prayer rug still warm from where we had prayed side by side that same morning. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. How could a life built so carefully be swept away in a single moment? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in the back of that SUV, eyes wide, breath shaking, lips forming my name, even as the guards shoved her inside. I kept hearing the sound of the door closing, that solid metallic thud that seemed to echo inside my chest over and over. At dawn, I stumbled to the mosque. I didn't want to go, but I had nowhere else to turn. I thought maybe the imam would know what to do, maybe he would understand, maybe he would intervene in some way. I couldn't imagine. He had known me since childhood. He had praised my recitation, told my parents I was destined for religious excellence. Surely he would help. But when I knelt before him in his small study room at the back of the mosque and told him everything, he didn't even flinch. His expression remained calm, distant, as if he were listening to a weather report rather than a man whose world was collapsing. "Yusuf," he said softly, folding his hands, "we do not question the will of Allah. If the prince has taken interest in your wife, perhaps this is a test for you. Submit, accept, do not resist what has been decreed." His words sliced through me. A test? How could losing my wife to a powerful man who saw her as an object be a test? How could the God I had served faithfully all my life allow this? I wanted to scream, to grab him by the shoulders, to shake him until he understood that this wasn't a lesson, it was injustice. Cruel, brutal injustice. But all I did was nod and walk out of the mosque with tears blurring my vision. Have you ever gone to someone you trusted your whole life, expecting comfort, only to be handed emptiness? That was how it felt, like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My next stop was the police station. A part of me knew it would be futile, but desperation makes a man prepare to face humiliation if there's even a sliver of hope. The officer behind the desk barely looked at me when I told him my wife had been taken by Prince Samir's guards. When I mentioned the prince's name, his pen froze, and he glanced up with an expression I can only describe as amusement. "You're mistaken," he said with a dry laugh. "The prince doesn't take women, he honors them." He said honors like it was a gift, like I should be grateful. I insisted, my voice cracking, that Maryam was my wife, that she had been taken without consent. He leaned forward then, lowering his voice into a tone that made my stomach twist. "Men who accuse the royal family," he whispered, "tend to disappear." I left that station with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Fear wrapped around me like cold fingers. For the first time, I realized that no one, not the mosque, not the police, not even my own neighbors, would stand with me against the prince. When I called my brothers, hoping they would help me fight, they became strangely quiet. "Yusuf," one of them said hesitantly, "maybe you should accept what has happened. We cannot oppose the palace. Think of our families. Don't drag us into danger." Even my mother, who loved Maryam dearly, begged me not to make trouble. "Some things," she whispered shakily, "are too powerful to challenge." It was the loneliest moment of my life. I stood in my living room, surrounded by the echoes of their fears and excuses, feeling like I had become invisible. The days turned into a blur of waiting, pacing, crying silently into my hands, listening for footsteps in the hallway that never stopped at my door. I stopped going to work. Food tasted like dust. The world around me continued with its usual rhythm: car horns, market vendors shouting, children playing, but inside me everything was silent, hollow, dead. Nights were the worst. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind torturing me with images of what might be happening to Maryam. Every sound outside, every car engine, every distant shout made my heart jerk. I kept imagining her calling my name, but when I turned toward her side of the bed, there was only emptiness. And the prayers, the prayers. I prayed 5 times a day, more than that sometimes. I begged Allah to intervene, to send angels, to break the power of the prince. I cried until my throat burned, reciting verses through clenched teeth, pounding the floor with my fists. But heaven stayed silent. Have you ever prayed with every ounce of your soul, only to feel your words fall back onto your own body like stones? That silence can drive a person insane. It began to gnaw at something deep inside me, something I didn't know could break. One night, About 10 days after Maryam was taken, I collapsed onto the prayer rug, her prayer rug, and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. My forehead pressed against the same spot where hers had touched every morning, and I whispered, Allah, why? Why won't you answer me? Why did you let this happen? But instead of comfort, I felt only the coldness of the floor. The crack inside me widened. By the third week, I was barely functioning. I remember looking into the bathroom mirror one morning and not recognizing the man staring back at me. My beard was untrimmed, my eyes sunken and red, my face tight with exhaustion. I felt like a ghost wearing my own skin. Late one night, as the city slept and my apartment stood silent, a thought crept into my mind, dark, frightening, heavy. Maybe the pain could stop. Maybe I didn't have to keep living in this agony. Maybe there was a way to end it. My hands trembled as I opened the drawer under the sink. The metal glinted under the dim light. I picked it up. My breath shook. My vision blurred. I sank to the floor. God, I whispered, not even sure who I was speaking to anymore. If you see me, if anyone sees me, say something, do something. I can't live like this. Silence. Just my own breath, ragged and broken. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point the tears stopped. My heart felt numb, my mind empty, and then just as I thought I might lose myself completely, there was a sudden knock on my door. A soft, hesitant knock. Not like a neighbor complaining, not like a guard demanding attention, just gentle. I wiped my face with my sleeve and forced myself to stand. When I opened the door, my neighbor Ahmed was standing there. He looked at me with eyes full of something I hadn't seen in anyone for weeks. Compassion. He glanced past me into the apartment, then back at my face. Yusuf, he said quietly, I've been hearing you cry for days. Can I come in? That moment, though I didn't know it then, was the first step toward the God who would rewrite my entire story. I let Ahmed into the apartment without saying a word. I didn't have the strength to speak. Even breathing felt like a burden. He stepped inside carefully, as though afraid his footsteps might break something fragile. Maybe he sensed that I was already broken. He glanced around the room, the untouched food on the table, the rumpled prayer rugs, the air thick with days of unspoken grief. But he didn't judge me. He simply sat down on the edge of the sofa and waited for me to gather whatever pieces of myself were still left. After a long silence, he finally said, Yusuf, I'm so sorry about Maryam. Just hearing her name spoken aloud made my throat tighten. I sank to the floor with my back against the wall, my knees pulled to my chest like a child. Ahmed's eyes softened even more. I didn't come to pry, he continued gently. It's just, I've heard you crying every night. I can't stand by anymore. Something inside me cracked. No one is helping, I whispered. Everyone tells me to accept it. The imam, the police, even my own family. My voice broke. Everyone is afraid. Ahmed nodded slowly, as if he understood fear better than I did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was heavy with exhaustion, despair, and a strange sense of waiting, like something unseen was listening. Then Ahmed inhaled deeply, as though preparing himself for a risk. Yusuf, I've been praying for you. I almost scoffed. Praying to Allah won't bring her back. He shook his head. I wasn't praying to Allah. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? His next words landed like a spark tossed into a room full of gas. I was praying to Jesus. I stared at him, certain I had misheard, but his face held only calm conviction. A Christian? In our building? In Riyadh? In this conservative neighborhood? What are you saying? I hissed, my voice trembling with shock and anger. Do you want to be executed? Do you want to drag me down with you? But he didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He didn't match my anger. His gentleness in the face of my panic disarmed me more than any argument could have. Yusuf, he said quietly, I know what this sounds like. I know how dangerous it is to even speak his name here. But I also know what I've seen. I've seen Jesus rescue people from impossible situations, and I believe he can rescue you too. I shook my head hard. No, no, don't say that name. Don't bring this into my home. Why not? Ahmed interrupted softly. Your God hasn't answered you. You've prayed until your body collapsed. You've begged for mercy, and still the darkness is suffocating you. His words hit me like blows because they were true, painfully, undeniably true. He leaned forward, his voice steady. Yusuf, what do you have left to lose? That question pierced me deeper than anything else. I had lost everything, my hope, my dignity, my faith, my will to live. What did I have to lose? My breath shook as tears gathered again, but anger rose up to protect my pride. How dare you, I whispered. How dare you suggest I turn to something forbidden, something blasphemous? Ahmed didn't back away. I'm not asking you to betray anything. I'm asking you to survive. His eyes glistened. I'm asking you to call out to the only one who listens in the deepest darkness. The room felt too small suddenly, too still. I stood up abruptly and pointed to the door. Leave, I whispered. I can't just leave. Ahmed nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't try to persuade me further. He simply stood, walked to the doorway, and before stepping out, he said quietly, if you ever want to talk, if you ever want to pray, I'm right next door. And then he left. When the door clicked shut, the silence swallowed me again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. His words lingered in the air like smoke. What do you have left to lose? I sank onto the floor again, burying my face in my hands as sobs tore out of me. The humiliation of despair, the betrayal of unanswered prayers, the sheer weight of loneliness, everything crashed down all at once. For the first time in my life, I whispered into the empty room, Allah, are you even there? No answer, no warmth, nothing. The silence was so complete, it felt like a verdict. And that was the moment, the exact moment, when something deep inside me finally snapped. A thread broke, a belief crumbled, a door one I had kept locked my entire life shifted ever so slightly. I didn't know it then, but that breaking point was not the end of my faith. It was the place where Jesus would soon enter. I didn't open my door again for 2 days after Ahmed left. Shame kept me locked inside, shame for how I had broken down in front of him, shame for how I had pushed him away, shame for how weak I had become. But underneath all of that, buried deeper than I wanted to admit, was something far more dangerous. Curiosity. His words kept circling in my mind like a bird trapped inside a room. Your God hasn't answered you. What do you have left to lose? Call out to the one who listens in the deepest darkness. I tried to dismiss them. I tried to pray harder, to fill the void with familiar words, but every prayer felt like throwing stones into a bottomless well. Nothing came back. Nothing ever came back. By the third night, exhaustion pushed me to the floor beside Maryam's prayer rug. The fabric still carried the faint scent of her perfume, and the moment my fingers touched it, my chest tightened. My breath shook. I whispered her name out of reflex, as if saying it aloud would somehow summon her home. I pressed my forehead to the rug and cried until my tears soaked into the threads. Allah, I whispered, voice trembling, please, please do something. Silence answered me once again. Have you ever reached a point where the pain becomes physical, where your heart aches the way a bone aches when it's broken? That was how it felt, a stabbing, twisting, unbearable weight in my chest. I curled on the floor, clutching the rug, unable to breathe under the heaviness of it. And then a thought slipped into my mind, quiet, forbidden, terrifying. Try Jesus. I jolted upright as if someone had slapped me. No, I whispered. No, I can't. The very idea felt like betrayal. A lifetime of warnings echoed in my ears. Blasphemy, deception, punishment, hellfire. My father's voice, my imam's voice, my own voice. But another voice, softer, questioned them all. What do you have left to lose? I sat there shaking, torn between fear and desperation. My mind fought the idea like a wild animal. But my heart, the broken, bleeding part of me, leaned toward it like a dying man reaching for water. Tentatively, almost unwillingly, I looked up toward the ceiling. Not toward Mecca, just upward. My mouth felt dry. My tongue felt heavy. Even speaking the name felt dangerous. But desperation can make a man cross lines he never imagined. Jesus. The word came out faint, almost soundless. My whole body tensed as if expecting punishment, but nothing happened. No thunder, no fire, no judgment. Just an unexpected stillness. So I said it again. Jesus, if you can hear me. My voice cracked. Tears welled up again. I don't even know if you exist. I don't know what is true anymore. But I can't breathe without Maryam. I can't live like this. They say you care about the brokenhearted. If that's true, please help me. Please bring her back. Please protect her. The moment the words left my lips, something happened in that room, something so impossible I still struggle to describe it. It was as if the air changed. A warmth, gentle, soft, alive, began to wrap around me. It wasn't heat like from a fire. It wasn't the warmth of my own body. It was something external, something that seeped through my skin, soothing the raw, torn places inside me. My heartbeat slowed, my breathing eased. The panic that had lived inside my chest for weeks loosened its grip. I felt held, not by arms, but by a presence that felt impossibly peaceful. I opened my eyes and looked around. Nothing in the room had changed. The walls were still dirty, the light bulbs still flickered, but the atmosphere felt different, thick with comfort, like someone invisible had stepped into the room and sat beside me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. I sat there for a long time, suspended in that strange, quiet peace, afraid to move in case it vanished. Eventually, exhaustion washed over me, not the suffocating exhaustion of despair, but a deep, restful tiredness. I lay down on Maryam's prayer rug and closed my eyes. And for the first time since she was taken, I slept. Not restless sleep, not nightmares, just sleep, deep and peaceful, as if a heavy curtain had finally been lifted off my soul. When I woke the next morning, my mind felt clear for the first time in weeks. I brewed tea, something I hadn't done in days, and sat at the table, trying to understand what had happened the night before. That was when my phone rang. Unknown number. My hands shook as I lifted it to my ear. And then, Yusuf, her voice, Maryam's voice, soft, fragile, alive. In that moment, I knew without doubt, without hesitation, that the presence I felt the night before was real, and that Jesus had heard me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I pressed the phone to my ear so tightly my hand began to shake, terrified that if I loosened my grip even slightly, her voice might disappear like a dream slipping through my fingers. There was static on the line, soft, trembling, but through it, I heard her breathing. I heard her whisper my name again. Yusuf, I'm safe for now. I can't talk long. My heart slammed against my ribs. Tears blurred my vision. I pressed my free hand against the table to steady myself. Maryam, I choked out. Where are you? Are you hurt? What have they? I'm in one of the guest quarters, she whispered urgently. They watch everything. I found a moment when the guard stepped away. I needed you to know I'm alive. Alive. The word lit something inside me that had been dead for weeks. She spoke quickly, her breath trembling. Yusuf, something strange is happening in this palace. Every time Prince Samir tries to come near me, something stops him. He walks toward my door and suddenly turns around. He reaches for me and a guard interrupts him. Yesterday, he got a splitting headache the moment he stepped into my room.
Her voice lowered further, filled with awe. The other women here, they're terrified of him. They say he takes whatever he wants. But with me, it's like he forgets. It's like something is blocking him. My breath caught. My whole body tingled. The memory of last night flooding back the moment I whispered Jesus' name, the feeling of warmth surrounding me, the peace that came out of nowhere. Maryam, I whispered softly, have you been praying? There was a pause on the line, a long one. Then, yes, she breathed, but not to Allah. A chill ran through me, not of fear, but of impossible recognition. She swallowed hard before continuing. The first night here, I cried until I couldn't speak. I begged Allah to protect me, but nothing happened. Nothing changed. I felt alone, Yusuf, so alone. Her voice cracked. Then I remembered what Ahmed told us months ago about Jesus. My breath hitched. What did you do? I prayed, she whispered. I didn't even know how. I just said, Jesus, if you are real, please help me. And Yusuf, her voice trembled with wonder. Something filled the room, a peace I have never felt before. And after that night, the prince couldn't touch me. I closed my eyes as tears streamed down my face. The presence I had felt, the warmth, the silence breaking. Jesus had answered both of us. Maryam, I choked out. Last night, I prayed too. For the first time, I called his name, and I felt someone come into the room. She let out a small sob. Yusuf, I think he's protecting us. I think he's the reason I'm still safe. For a long moment, we simply breathed together across the distance, two souls connected by the same miracle. Suddenly, she whispered, panicked, I hear footsteps. I have to go. Yusuf, please keep praying. He's listening. The line went dead. I sat there unmoving, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the call ended. I felt like I was floating, weightless, suspended between fear and awe. Everything I had believed, everything I thought I knew about God, about power, about protection, had been shattered and rebuilt in mere minutes. Have you ever felt your entire worldview tilt like the ground beneath you rearranged itself? That was what happened to me in that moment. The silence that had tormented me for weeks was gone. For the first time, I felt heard. I felt seen. I felt loved. I grabbed my jacket and rushed next door. When Ahmed opened the door, I didn't say anything. I simply fell into his arms and sobbed. He held me like a brother. She called. I whispered. Maryam called. She's safe, and she prayed to Jesus. Ahmed's eyes filled with tears. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Yusuf, he's already working. Jesus is with her. He's with you. This is only the beginning. We sat together for hours as he read to me from an Arabic New Testament words I had never heard before, yet felt like they were written directly for my wounded soul. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Rest, the one thing I had not felt in weeks. As Ahmed read, that same warmth began to rise in my chest, again, not from around me this time, but from within me, as if someone had made a home inside my broken heart. That night, I slept with my Bible pressed to my chest and whispered the same name that had saved Maryam. Jesus, don't stop, please. Keep protecting her. Keep showing us who you are. And deep inside my soul, in a place I didn't know existed, I felt an answer. A quiet, gentle promise. I'm not finished yet. From the moment Maryam's call ended, my entire world shifted from despair to determination. I no longer felt like a man crawling through darkness. I felt like someone who had finally seen a ray of light and was ready to chase it with everything inside him. Jesus had answered. He had moved. He had protected her in a place where no power on earth could reach. And once you see a miracle with your own eyes, you cannot return to the man you were before. Ahmed began bringing me news. Not rumors, not guesses. Real, whispered information passed Through the underground network of believers scattered throughout the city, maids, cleaners, kitchen workers, laborers, drivers, ordinary people who lived invisible lives inside the palaces of the powerful. It was through them that I first heard the stories. One servant reported that Prince Samir had stormed down the corridor toward Maryam's room one evening, anger burning in his eyes. But halfway to her door, he stopped abruptly, clutching his chest, gasping for breath. He staggered backwards like he had been pushed. The guard beside him swore he saw the prince's face go pale, ghostly pale, as if something unseen had passed directly through him. Samir retreated immediately, shouting for a doctor. Another maid whispered that every time the prince summoned Maryam, something unexpected interrupted him, a political crisis, an urgent call from a royal cousin, sudden nausea, migraine so severe he locked himself in his private chamber for hours. The palace staff began calling Maryam the untouchable woman. Some even said her room felt different from the others, warmer, still, protected. A few of the older women claimed they felt something holy around her. When Ahmed told me this, my hands trembled. I felt an overwhelming mixture of disbelief and awe. The God I thought was silent had been moving the entire time like a great king positioning pieces on a chessboard, unseen but unstoppable. Jesus wasn't just comforting us. He was interfering with the plans of a prince. But the miracle didn't end there. A few days later, Ahmed rushed into my apartment with news so shocking he had to catch his breath before speaking. Yusuf, the prince, has lost all interest in Maryam. I stared at him. What do you mean? He doesn't want her anymore. He barely remembers why he took her. The staff say he reacts with irritation when her name is mentioned. He even said, "Send that girl back to her family until I decide what to do with her." I collapsed into the nearest chair, my heart pounding. He's letting her go? Ahmed nodded slowly. For now. But Yusuf, you cannot trust his moods. You must move quickly. Jesus is opening a door. You must walk through it before it closes. The next day, late in the afternoon, I heard footsteps on the stairs outside my apartment. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. For weeks, footsteps had meant fear guards, neighbors whispering, family urging me to forget. But this time, something inside me recognized the rhythm. Light, careful, familiar. The door opened. Maryam stepped inside. I don't remember standing. I don't remember crossing the room. One moment I was frozen on the chair. The next moment I was holding her so tightly I thought we might fuse into one body. She smelled like jasmine and dust and tears. Her thin frame shook in my arms, but she was alive. Alive. We cried without words. No sound. Just two broken souls finally allowed to breathe again. When she pulled back, I cupped her face in my hands, searching her eyes for any sign of harm. But what I saw was something else entirely, something new. A light, a peace, a strength that didn't exist there before. She placed her trembling hand on my chest. Yusuf, Jesus protected me. We fell to our knees right there on the floor. There were no rules, no rituals, no directions. We simply clasped hands, looked upward, and begged Jesus to take our lives, our future, our fear. We confessed our exhaustion, our brokenness, our hunger for truth. I cried so hard I couldn't speak. Maryam whispered, "Jesus, we belong to you now. Lead us wherever you want." And the peace that filled the room, it was the same presence that had comforted me on the night I prayed for the first time. Only now it was stronger, warmer, almost tangible, like invisible arms wrapping around both of us at once. That night changed everything, but it also forced us to face a terrifying truth. We could not stay in Saudi Arabia. Ahmed came to our apartment with a map and a look of urgency. "Yusuf, you and Maryam must leave immediately. The prince may change his mind. The palace may demand her return. And if they discover you've both become followers of Jesus," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We all knew what could happen: imprisonment, public punishment, execution. Fear surged through me, but it wasn't the suffocating fear of before. This fear had purpose. This fear meant movement. Ahmed outlined the plan: forged travel documents, a car waiting at dawn, a string of believers who would guide us from Riyadh to the Jordanian border. Every step had been prepared long before we knew we would need it. Another miracle, another sign that Jesus didn't just rescue us. He had been orchestrating our escape long before we prayed our first prayer. At midnight, Maryam and I burned our Qur'ans, not out of hatred, but out of final surrender, letting go of the chains of fear and duty that had defined our lives. The pages curled into ash, and as they burned, it felt like the last remnants of our old identities dissolved. Before sunrise, the escape began. The streets of Riyadh waved with heat even in the early hours. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every passing car made my pulse spike. But each time fear rose up, I whispered Jesus' name, and peace steadied my footsteps. At the airport, the miracles multiplied. At the first checkpoint, the guard who was supposed to examine passports was suddenly called away. His replacement barely glanced at ours. At the second checkpoint, the facial recognition system malfunctioned. At the third, a guard overturned his coffee cup, causing chaos and forcing everyone to reroute around the station straight through an unmonitored lane. By the time we boarded the plane, Maryam was crying into her scarf. Not from fear, from relief, from awe. Jesus wasn't just opening doors, he was carrying us through them. 4 hours later, the wheels touched down in Jordan. When the plane stopped, I took Maryam's hand and we stepped onto the tarmac as free people for the first time in our lives. We didn't know what our future held. We didn't know where we would live or how we would survive or what danger still waited for us. But we knew one thing with absolute certainty. The same Jesus who protected Maryam in the palace, the same Jesus who opened the borders for us, the same Jesus who shattered the power of a prince, would finish what he started. We were safe, we were alive, and we belonged to him. Today, as I sit in our small apartment in Toronto, sunlight spilling across the floor, I sometimes have to remind myself that the life I once lived was real. Maryam hums quietly in the kitchen as she prepares tea, her voice carrying that soft joy I thought I would never hear again. Our son sleeps in his crib near the window, one tiny hand curled around the edge of his blanket. Snow drifts gently outside, settling over the city like a white whisper of peace. And inside me, there is a stillness I never knew possible. I lost everything I thought I needed in order to survive my certainty, my religious identity, my sense of control. But in losing them, I found someone greater. Jesus didn't just save my wife. He saved me from despair, from hopelessness, from the prison of fear I didn't even know I lived in. He rebuilt my heart from the pieces I thought were beyond repair. We are not wealthy. We don't live in luxury. But every morning I wake up knowing I am loved not by a distant deity who demands perfection, but by a Savior who stepped into my deepest darkness, held me as I wept, and called me his own. And sometimes I find myself watching Maryam as she rocks our son, whispering prayers over him, and I think, how is it possible that a life destroyed so completely could be restored so beautifully? Then I remember this is what Jesus does. He specializes in the impossible. Have you ever felt trapped in a situation too heavy for your heart to carry? Have you ever whispered for help in the dark, wondering if anyone heard? I'm telling you now, Jesus hears you, he sees you, and the same God who protected my wife from a powerful prince, who opened borders we could never cross on our own, who rebuilt our shattered lives, he can meet you exactly where you are. You're only one prayer away from your breakthrough. If you want to know this Jesus, the Jesus who saves, who heals, who restores, just talk to him. Right now, in your own words, he's closer than you think. And if you need prayer, if you need hope, or if you've experienced something similar, leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to pray for you. My name is Yusuf Al-Hadi. Jesus Christ saved my life, and he wants to save yours too.